Coming up in today's video, we are going to be exploring 3 different news stories that are very interesting. One of them being the infamous return of Vince McMahon to the WWE. And trust me when I tell you, that is a crazy story. And it sounds like it very well could be happening. But before we get to that, we're going to have to explore a conversation surrounding a possible return from a very legendary person in the world of WWE, WCW, and TNA. And yes, we are going to talk about this infamous this tease that came from Triple H. Guys, it sounds like WWE is ushering in a new era yet again. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts. And trust me, I do see red flags. If you guys want more videos like this, don't forget to click that subscribe button and ring the bell. This way you never miss a video on the channel. I'm going to keep you guys updated along the way every single day with new videos. And this one is very, very interesting because I actually want to kick things off with Scott Steiner. Now, this is a guy who I massively enjoyed watching as a kid, right? Like, I think everybody knows I was a huge Scott Steiner fan. And this is really interesting because Scott Steiner has always had this weird, complicated issue with the WWE. And it wasn't up until recently where maybe things were kind of getting better, but Scott Steiner has, historically speaking, always been vocal about the WWE. He's always been outspoken about the WWE, and that includes Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, which is why it makes for such an interesting conversation. However, Scott Steiner is actually talking about coming back to WWE. And he did this at the Geeked convention where basically he was asked about this. And he basically said if WWE wants him there, especially to help with like Braun Breaker or to work with Braun Breaker, he would do it. And this is a very interesting thing because WWE has completely changed the way they conduct business when it comes to legends, right? And this was something that I have been very critical of from the perspective of WWE. Historically speaking, legends in the company have been given not that much love, not that much respect. And sometimes they've been, you know, they WWE, sometimes you could tell they have their favoritism. You know, groups like DX and NWO tend to get a lot of love, but other groups don't tend to get a lot of love. And then obviously we saw Scott Steiner get inducted into the Hall of Fame with his brother, which was a remarkable achievement. But of course, at the same time too, WWE inducts people into the Hall of Fame, and those people don't necessarily like Triple H, right? Or maybe they didn't like Vince McMahon. We saw how that was with Bret Hart. I hate to say this, but, you know, WWE has done wrong with legends, okay? I hate to say it. And I think the reason why I giggle a little bit at the thought of this is because Scott Steiner coming back to WWE television in 2025 would be incredibly fun to watch. No, I'm not talking about Scott Steiner wrestling in 2025. But I wonder if WWE maybe could take the page out of a notebook from AEW. One thing I consistently praise about AEW is how they've had veterans and legends come in and manage superstars, and they're not the main focal point. They're not the main focal point. And I think sometimes that tends to be one of the things I enjoy the most about how Tony Khan and AEW conduct business. And maybe in this particular situation, I would like WWE to copy them. Because I think WWE having Scott Steiner on the side of Braun Breaker would be incredibly fun to watch. And after all, that is his nephew. The family ties, it genuinely makes sense. But I personally would love to see something of this magnitude happen. And if Scott Steiner were to return to be an on-screen figure, I would 1000% enjoy it. The guy has given us plenty of laughs throughout the years. The memes, the stuff that he did in TNA, I think sometimes doesn't get as much respect. But Scott Steiner in TNA was incredibly fun to watch. Obviously, we're all aware of the Steiner Math promo. But if Scott Steiner returns, I will be a very, very happy man. That brings us to our next topic, ladies and gentlemen. Triple H is on Twitter. He's on social media, and he is talking yet again, creating hype for another episode of WWE Raw. But this is where things get really interesting. Because on WWE television, we have been told several times it's a new era. It's a new landscape. It's a new this. It's a new that. It's history in the making. It's groundbreaking. It's buzzworthy. It's a million words that they give to describe a certain episode of television. You watch it, and it just so turns out that it wasn't actually that special by any means. Now, today, WWE's Chief Creative Content Officer, Triple H, Paul Levesque, he came out with a tweet that says, a lot can happen on a Saturday night in WWE. Four high-stake matches, 2 new world champions crowned, and a history-making announcement for December 13th. There is a new landscape in WWE starting tonight on WWE Raw. Now, he is right. The John Cena tournament announcement was revealed, which was huge. We know next week, I believe, is in Boston. Raw is in Boston, and John Cena will be there. But then you see what WWE has advertised today, and I think this is maybe a little bit problematic because you're telling us this is a new landscape, and obviously CM Punk is world champion, and you're going to have to set up a storyline there, and maybe you have something between him and Braun Breaker or LA Knight or Bronson Reed or maybe even Roman Reigns, for example. That could be really cool. But we're in a situation currently, as it stands, that this show that they're advertising doesn't really seem like anything that impressive. And I'm critical when I need to be critical. And I think this is one of those examples of Triple H using big buzzwords and teasing things and possibly falling short. Because Triple H and WWE have revealed some announced matches for tonight. We know CM Punk will be on the show with the World Heavyweight Championship. We know the Judgment Day rematch. JD McDonough, Finn Balor going up against AJ Styles, and Dragon Lee. We know Raquel Rodriguez and Roxanne Perez are going up against Nikki Bella and Stephanie Vaquer, and we know the Kabuki Warriors are going up against Bayley and Lyra Valkyria. I mean, I'm not saying this is going to be a bad episode of Raw, but what I'm saying is WWE might not be really changing anything here. And that leads me to be very concerned with how WWE conducts business sometimes, because the truth is, sometimes these big announcements, it's a new landscape, the landscape has changed, it's a new era, all these things that they say sometimes just leads to nothing. I've criticized Tony Khan and AEW for this, and I'm criticizing WWE for this as well. This is very, very problematic for the WWE because you can't be talking about a new landscape and then it just seems like the same old shit. And that's the problem. Seriously. That brings us to our final topic. Vince McMahon returning to the WWE. What is really happening here? I couldn't believe this myself, to be quite honest with you guys. But it sounds like WWE is having Vince McMahon back. Now, this is where it gets tricky, and maybe it's a gray area. But according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer, sometimes it's very hit or miss, but this one very well makes sense. On the Wrestling Observer newsletter, it said that they have heard people speculate that both Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America, and Vince McMahon are both going to be present at John Cena's final match in DC. Now, there are people in WWE who believe this to be the case. That's interesting. Because if Donald Trump is in attendance at this event, I'm assuming commentary will probably acknowledge Donald Trump being in attendance. We've seen this with UFC events all the time. Look, it's the president, Donald Trump. He's walking in. He greets, Daniel Cormier, Joe Rogan, the other commentators, right? So I would figure maybe Joe Tessitore, Michael Cole, Corey Graves, somebody on commentary, whoever's there, I could see them acknowledging Donald Trump. Now, Vince McMahon, Donald Trump obviously have history. They're friends. So it could make a lot of sense that Vince McMahon is seated with Donald Trump. But then does WWE acknowledge Vince McMahon? That becomes a very interesting talking point. And then another very interesting talking point is Donald Trump is reportedly invited to attend the event from the WWE. But what about Vince McMahon? Is this a situation where Donald Trump is invited to the event? Vince McMahon has to pay for the ticket that sits next to him? Let's be realistic. That sounds pretty unlikely. So if WWE is comping Vince McMahon's ticket and they're bringing him to the event with Donald Trump and he's seated with Trump, how do you show Vince McMahon on screen and not acknowledge him? And that also becomes another rather interesting talking point. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but with TKO, the way this company is, it would not put it past me one bit if WWE were to maybe lighten up regarding Vince McMahon. Maybe they'll lighten up regarding Vince McMahon. The truth is, maybe they'll be a little bit easier about Vince McMahon being on television or being acknowledged at all. And you have to factor in John Cena in his past with Vince McMahon. John Cena is still friends with Vince McMahon. John Cena has publicly talked about his friendship with Vince McMahon despite the allegations. And quite frankly, if it wasn't for Vince McMahon, there would not be a John Cena. This is John Cena's retirement match. Triple H and WWE have told us numerous times that whatever John Cena wants is what John Cena gets. If John Cena wants Donald Trump and Vince McMahon there, I don't know. I don't know. But for once, I actually think Dave Meltzer probably isn't wrong here. And that's what makes so much of this so interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the Ango Show.